I'm very happy indeed to make some contribution to this record for Sir John Gielgud's 75th birthday. 75. Goodness, my young friend's really growing up, isn't he? He catch me up if I'm not careful. Well, it's a great many years since we first met. John was 26 and I was 28. We met first at the Old Vic Theatre. I didn't like John very much at first sight. I was rather stuffy and I thought he was rather flamboyant. I'd never met anyone quite like him before. And that's not surprising because you don't meet geniuses every day. However, when we worked together in the theatre, I began to admire his craftsmanship. And next, I began to like him. And last, we formed a friendship. And the gift of John's friendship has been of very great value to my life. Well, what is the nature of this genius? It springs out of the great reserve of John's energy and his theatrical intelligence. And springs is the word, because in John's case, his exuberance bubbles out of him like a brilliant fountain, quick and fast. And that's what's wanted and needed in the theatre. John's generous, affectionate, kind, oh, very kind. I can never get him to lose his temper. Sometimes during the production, I say, that bastard over there, tell him to belt up, will you? Tell him. But John said, well, I might just say a word. He never does. And we've never had a cross word between us all the time we've been together. Well, now, about his Hamlet. He first played it in 1929 and has played it since for over 500 times all over the world. It may indeed be said to be the most famous Hamlet of our generation. When he did play it at the Old Vic, over the Waterloo Bridge, in Lillian Bayliss' early days with her theatre, he really did make history, almost set the Thames on fire. This brilliant young actor was London's newest discovery. The carriage trade flocked over that Waterloo Bridge to go and see him. He set the Old Vic for the first time on the map of fashion. Well, indeed, it's never quite fallen off since. So that was quite an historic achievement. But luckily, John is very articulate, and lately he's recorded some thoughts about his Hamlet, and that's what we're going to hear now.
When I first played it, I was 25. I thought, now, this is the great juvenile part of all times. I'm going to make a terrible hash of this, because I'd seen about 12 Hamlets by that time. H.B. Irving was the first. I'd seen Henry Bainton. I'd seen Ernest Milton. I think Rupert Harvey, Russell Thorndike. So I thought I shall just give a terrible hodgepodge of all these performances. And I'd known at dramatic school how I used to trail around waving my cloak in the air and posing in my sword and crying a lot. And I thought, I don't think that's the thing at all. And I sort of threw myself onto the part like somebody trying to swim. And I found it sort of held me up if I really was truthful in it. First I thought, there are so many unpleasant things in this man's character and in the part of Hamlet that all the traditional performances rather sweeten them. I read how Tree had come back on Nana Racina kissed Ophelia's hair behind her back, and as Bob Robertson had ended the closet scene on I must be cruel, only to be kind, and all the last part cut out. The part had been so romanticized, and Goethe had said that Hamlet was a precious Grecian urn broken by the flowers, or something very, very sententious. And all the kind of coarse, lively thrust of the play came upon me when we did it at the Vic. We did the full version one night and then a cut version the next night, which was quite difficult to remember, of course, but terribly exciting. And you didn't have time to indulge in the play. You didn't have time to make very long pauses. And I did realize, even with Barrymore, who I had admired very much, that he had cut the play tremendously. And that, for instance, the closet scene, which he played heavily Oedipus complex, sobbing on Gertrude's bosom and all that, was a bit sentimental. But Barrymore had got what I thought was very valuable, just as Milton and Thorndike had, the most wonderful edge, terrible demonic sense of humor. Barrymore's eyebrow would shoot up in the air, and he'd say something with such venom. And then this beautiful profile and wonderful elegance of appearance, although he was 45, and I'd seen him at a dinner with great poached egg eyes, and had to be got up with black coffee every night because he was drinking so much. But on the stage, in this performance of Hamlet that I saw, he was the most romantic, beautiful creature you can imagine. When I first played it, it was 1929, then it was 1934, then it was 1936 in America, 39 at Elsinore, 44 at the Haymarket. Each time I was 3 or 4 years older, each time a different director. Twice I directed it myself. So I began to wonder which on earth was the one I should stick to, which thing I'd done on which line was most effective of the 4 or 5 times. Of course, most of the people who remember my Hamlet saw the last production in 44 because I'm too old for them to have seen any earlier ones. But the general opinion was that my first one at the Old Vic was the best because it was the first time they'd ever seen a very young Hamlet. You see, the actors in the Edwardian period never played it until they were 40. So that to play it at the age of 25 was a great experience for the public as well as for me. And I suppose the youthful tantrums and despair of the opening scenes were very much more poignant because I was so young. And then, as I say, I began to find the more violent parts, colours in the part, and try and bring them out more. I think it was rather sentimental, the first production. But I hope it got better. And the last time I went with Rylands at the Haymarket at the end of the war, I really felt I was too old to get the same effect of the opening of the play. But I think I was better in the last part of the play. And Barker had given me a lot of marvellous notes about the play when we did the Elsinore production just before the war. And then after that I went and played it to the troops in the Middle East, which was quite exciting because there was no critics and no question of whether you'd be a success or not. It was just a question of doing it as best you could. But it isn't a play you ought to play for 100 performances on end. It isn't quite fair because there's such scope in the part that it encourages you to try all sorts of different tricks and effects, which I think you need a very strict director to keep you on the line, because the play is so well known that the danger when you play it or when you see a production is you see a lot of showy scenes. The play scene, the closet scene, the nunnery scene, what does he do with that, what does he do with that, the graveyard scene. Instead of making it a proper play in which people don't know what's going to happen next, which they shouldn't. And that's why I love playing it to the troops, because the fact they didn't know what the story was made the thing twice as effective. I'm all for people being able to act quickly. I don't think there's any necessity for going into huddles and with yourself and having a method and things of moods and terrible, nobody speak to me for 10 minutes before I go on. Once in the war, I played Hamlet in Madras in a sort of Senate house, and we arrived on monsoon with the rain pouring down, and I immediately realized the stage was set so far back that the audience would never be able to see or hear properly. And I said, why this enormous orchestra pit? And they said, oh, well, of course we aren't using that for this. So I said, well, can it be filled in? And they said yes. So we tore around and got planks and filled up the whole orchestra pit, which jutted right out into the auditorium, which had sloped seats. And in about 2 hours, we re-rehearsed all the movements of the play. And we played it on this apron stage. And it never went so well, and I made my exits up through the middle of the audience, which I'd always dreaded. But in this particular night, there was a great storm raging outside, and it was very exciting having sort of redirected the play in a few hours, that I got more kick out of that production than almost any time I've ever played it.
John is a great conductor of his own music, of his own verse speaking. In my opinion, the best verse speaker we have. He moves fast, he creates large shapes, he uses a large brush, free and ample, but no detail is lost. The richness of Shakespeare is opened as a glittering casket. Nothing is niggardly picked out of it, but not one pearl is lost. Well, let us hear now the first great soliloquies from Hamlet, which he recorded for radio in 1948.